it's not great to focus on competition, and instead it's really important to just focus on your own business. Obviously, you take notice of it, you see that other companies are popping up, but what I've realized is that it's really just important to focus on your own business rather than looking at competition. Focus on who are your customers, make sure obviously that your business and your unit economics work, serve them with an incredible product, and you will ultimately win.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by Write For Me, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with John Fontein, co-founder at Sesame. John, how are you this morning?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Andrew. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. I appreciate you spending some time with us on Business Ninjas. Please tell us a bit about yourself and about Sesame.
Awesome. Would love to. I was going to quickly say anything to take me away from having to watch the kid this morning. So this is literally a fun 30 minutes for me. So quickly about Sesame. Sesame is an online platform that allows customers to buy healthcare services, actual doctor's appointments, for upfront and fixed cash prices. I think overall, our goal is to make shopping for healthcare online as easy as it is for the consumer to buy everything, as easy as it is to buy everything else online. And so the experience on Sesame mimics the experience that consumers are used to having across all other verticals, including travel, including retail. So specifically today, customers come to Sesame, they search for any type of medical service, whether it's a simple primary care appointment, or whether it's a dentist appointment, all the way to an MRI or a colonoscopy. They can see prices for each medical service. They can filter by the price. They can filter by the location. They can filter by mode of delivery, whether it's in person or virtual. And most importantly, if they decide that they do want to seek care, they can, quote, buy that service immediately there on the spot with a credit card. No insurance necessary, no surprise bills after they complete the purchase. We think this is the way that healthcare should be delivered. We think it's a 10 to 100x better than the current experience. And I hope folks out there will agree.
Well, it certainly seems logical on both sides of the equation, meaning as a consumer or a patient, you know what's coming financially. As a medical professional, you know what's coming financially and in a timely manner, as opposed to the typical insurance process. So that makes a lot of sense to me. What's your background? What brought you to Sesame?
So I know nothing about healthcare. That's what I'll caveat with. And I had no intention in my life to ever start a healthcare company, a health tech company. And so I'll caveat everything I say with that. And so I actually, I started my career in investment banking, Goldman Sachs. I did that for about 6 years. I realized that I was very, very bad at it. And then so I left to focus on my passion, which was music. I produced music. I wrote a bunch of songs. Had a lot of fun doing that for a couple of years. Started a record production company that I ultimately sold. That was a blast, and realized that while I really, really enjoyed actually composing and producing music, I didn't really enjoy the music industry itself, and so decided to make a complete career pivot, complete geography move as well. Moved to Europe, joined a travel company. Once I joined the travel company where I was in Berlin for a couple of years, I got the bug to start my own company in technology. What I saw was that specifically this company sold or sells train and bus tickets around Europe for travel. What I realized was most industries had been disrupted through marketplace structures, but there were still a couple that weren't. And so I was gung ho and keen on starting my own marketplace business. Came back to the US, was exploring a bunch of terrible, terrible ideas that I was planning on starting. I would always run them by one of my good friends, Mike. He calls me his best friend. He's like my eighth good friend. And he's actually a co-founder of Sesame. And he would always tell me that those ideas are terrible and that he had an idea in healthcare. And I always thought healthcare is a terrible space to start a business in. I know nothing about healthcare. I've been quite healthy, fortunately, all my life, and so I've had very few interactions with the healthcare system. That all changed in 2018 when my wife was pregnant with our first. We had a couple of complications during her pregnancy. Fortunately, everything is fine now. But that was our first and my first encounter with how convoluted and difficult it was to navigate the American healthcare system. Specifically, I didn't know, what condition my now daughter was going through at the time, my pregnant wife. I didn't know how much the procedures were going to cost. Navigating it was such a nightmare. This was the first time when I realized, oh wow, this is such a disjointed and broken experience. There has to be a way to make this better. And so I pinged Mike and I said, hey, tell me more about this idea you have about this healthcare services marketplace. In the movie, we'll go to a bar and we'll suddenly pull out a napkin, we'll write out some cool notes. But in reality, it was much more boring than that. We went back and forth iterating and on the idea. Mike said that in order to do this, we'd have to bring in his other friend David, who's another co-founder here at Sesame, whom he worked with closely on book to build this. And can go into the details further, but I don't want to bore you. Long story short, we decided, hey, I think we have an opportunity here to build a marketplace to actually disrupt the healthcare experience. And so we started the company in 2018 with the goal essentially to build Sesame into, as I said, a healthcare services marketplace that allows consumers or patients to buy healthcare just like they buy everything else online.
I don't think there's any worry about you boring anyone with your story, sir. I'm going to call you a devout masochist. You went from investment banking, which is one would assume from the sidelines a fairly financially secure endeavor, to jump into the music industry, where I spent 40 years toiling away and can tell you it's not exactly a 1 + 1 = $1 billion sort of adventure. And from there, you went to the even more stable medical and healthcare industry. Unbelievable. So tell me about the birth of the company, launching such a disruptive sort of platform at a time like 2018.
It's one thing to just say on paper, great, we're going to build a healthcare services marketplace. I think stating the obvious, but it's another thing to actually build the company. What we realized is you can read all these books on how to start a company, and how to start a marketplace. Quickly you realize that many things that you read, a lot of things are true, but many things don't actually hold for your business. I think specifically what we quickly realized was there's an old saying or a belief. I shouldn't say old. There's a belief that in order to start a marketplace, you have to focus on one thing and do that very, very well and expand from there. Amazon is obviously the hallmark of that, focusing on books and moving into other things. I think what we realized very quickly is there are some industries, specifically healthcare, where that actually doesn't apply. Namely, customers don't come searching for just one symptom. Customers are sick or patients are sick, right? They twisted their ankle, their throat hurts. And so they're not just looking for the platform that cures twisted ankles or the platform that cures sore throats. They're sick and they're looking for the platform to make them feel better. And so what we quickly realized was we had to be a horizontal marketplace and not a vertical one. Um, as we quickly looked through a couple of other analogies that we could find online, we realized that Home Advisor, or it was very similar to home ownership, specifically services related to your home. When you have an issue with your home, you don't actually, go to the platform that just serves electricians or the platform that just serves plumbers. You go to the platform, Home Advisor or others that serves you all kinds of services, professional services for your home. And so we quickly realized that was analogous to what we were building at Sesame. We had to build a horizontal marketplace that allowed customers to come for all their medical needs. Now, that becomes very, very difficult very quickly because from a pure customer acquisition standpoint, you can't just focus on, that one customer searching just for the twisted ankle or just for the sore throat. You have to focus on all customers coming for all types of ailments at all times. I think importantly, and hopefully you and listeners can relate, when you're sick, whether you wake up sick or you suddenly twist your ankle, it's not like you think, I should really see a doctor. Let me shop for this for, a couple of weeks or a couple of months, try to find the best deal. I might not buy it. If I do, great, and I might return it. I'm sick. I need to get help right away. You might push it off for a couple of days. You might push it off for a couple of weeks. But when you've decided that, okay, I need to seek help, I need to see a doctor, it's an immediate decision-making process. Very different from other consumer interactions or consumer behavior that you have online. And so I think there's obviously a lot of challenges we faced initially, but I think the biggest challenge, specifically for Sesame and for any marketplace, was how do we get that customer in that moment of need when we have they have a 5 second decision making time frame? How do we make sure that Sesame is top of mind, that Sesame has gotten enough trust from the customer that when they've decided they need to seek help, they'll first come to Sesame and they'll have enough trust in the platform to immediately purchase the medical service? Now, classic chicken and egg problem, which I can get into. We also had to determine, okay, when they come to Sesame and they've decided that they want that service, great, we've a check mark on that. How do we make sure that we have enough doctors on our platform to actually serve this patient? Because, as I said, it's a chicken and egg problem. If they've decided, I want Sesame and need help, and this sounds like a great platform, let me buy now. If we have no doctors or no supply, then naturally that demand will fall off. And so that is the eternal challenge of a marketplace. That's the big challenge that we faced early on starting Sesame.
How did you attract and contract with physicians before the platform was even a reality at that point? I mean, again, I harken back to my comment about the insurance industry. Any doctor that says, wait a minute, you're going to hand me a patient and it is a cash patient and it is a transactional relationship as opposed to the typical 120 days sort of net that they get for 20 cents on the dollar from an insurance company. So I can see the appeal to a doctor, but until your shingles in the yard and people respect and trust Sesame, how did you attract those doctors to sign up to be part of your network?
A lot of begging, a lot of knocking on doors. No, but really, it was just the three of us. First of all, it was the three of us in a two-person office because we didn't have enough money to afford the three-person we work, and so one of us had to work from the common areas. And so this was truly, it was the three of us, two of us in an office, one of us outside in the common area making cold calls to attract physicians. What we did, coming to the let's focus very narrowly, the old adages, focus on one thing very narrowly, is we decided we can do that from a geography standpoint. And so initially we focused our efforts very heavily on recruiting physicians only in Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. I had never been to Kansas City before. I only heard of the Chiefs, but I wasn't familiar with Kansas City. The reason we decided to launch in Kansas City, and it's actually a hack that exists in a lot of consumer-facing companies, is it turns out that a lot of companies, when they want to launch a new feature or a new product, they test it in Kansas City because if it works in Kansas City, it's very indicative of how it could broadly work for all of America. And if it doesn't work in Kansas City, then large coastal cities like New York or San Francisco never hear of it. And so a lot of companies, Burger King tests new flavors in Kansas City on a international scale. Australia happens to be that for a lot of tech companies as well. And so when Facebook or Snapchat testing features, they frequently launched it. I don't know if they still do in Australia. And so to test it in Australia, if it works in Australia, that's quite indicative of that it would work in the US. And so for a long time, Kansas City was our Australia. Focusing on just that one geography allowed us to really concentrate on our sales efforts on recruiting physicians just in a very defined region. And also it allowed us to concentrate demand across a couple of physicians. And so specifically, on day zero, if we were somehow successfully able to convince one physician to join, we were quite confident we could get, making the numbers up, but 5, 10 patients sent to that physician because we didn't have to acquire customers or patients on a nationwide basis. We just had to find 10 people in Kansas City to send to this physician. I'm oversimplifying, but naturally what then happens is once we hit a specific threshold using fake numbers, call it 20 patients, then we can get the second physician to come online. He sees that the first physician has received 20 patients from Sesame. He or she wants to now join Sesame. Further, that physician, the second physician, then says, you know what? I don't want physician one to capture all 20 patients. I want to actually capture those patients myself. And so let me think as a creative entrepreneurial physician how I can do that. The easiest and quickest lever that the physician and all suppliers frequently go to is our prices, being competitive on the prices. And so what the physician then did, or the second physician, was then lower prices a little to capture demand. I'll keep on extending this again with fake numbers. Now we have lower prices for the initial service that we offered. And so the customers get excited because what used to cost, again, using fake numbers, what used to cost $50 for a primary care appointment now suddenly costs $40. And so now we, instead of 20 patients, we have 50, all in Kansas City. Now physician three comes and says, I'll do that service for $30. And so on and so forth. And so what I'm describing in a nutshell is our marketplace dynamics. That's how every marketplace economy starts. That's how every marketplace is structured and works. And by focusing very heavily on one region, like Kansas City, we were able to accomplish that and show that that would hold true for medical services as well.
And what was the time frame for you to scale to other cities?
First of all, it felt like 20 years. Obviously, we're in year seven of what I'll call, and hopefully what will be an overnight success story. But I think the big catalyst that changed our company trajectory was the pandemic. I don't know if folks remember in 2020 something happened. There was a virus. Everybody was from home, working from home. Um, Quickly, I think why that changed. Obviously, there was the pandemic. There was so much demand for patients who needed to seek medical attention for COVID. But I think importantly, a lot of physicians had to close shop. Brick and mortar services because obviously patients couldn't visit their offices anymore. And so what we did was then create a platform for them to actually practice medicine virtually. It's now known as telemedicine. It's obviously gotten extremely big since the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, this was not part of our business at all. As I mentioned, we started in Kansas City. We then went to Texas. Then we then went to Denver, Colorado. That was our plan, was we were going to use the Uber WeWork approach of going city by city. Obviously, the pandemic changed everything. I think importantly, it suddenly there was statewide legislation that allowed for also physicians to practice and cross-state, and so you could suddenly be a New York resident and see a physician in Texas. That was obviously a huge tailwind for us. But I think importantly, suddenly we had an influx of customers seeking medical services, stating the obvious, and I'm sure folks remember this, without enough supply to keep up with the demand. We were able to essentially pull supply from the sideline because we were allowing physicians who didn't have other means to practice because they were brick and mortar services. They didn't have any type of virtual offering. We gave them all the tools they needed to manage and set up their virtual practice. And so today, we service thousands of clinicians on a nationwide basis who offer virtual services to physicians. So you can have a physician in Texas who offers virtual services to patients in New York or California. And what was most interesting about this whole experience was we had physicians come to us who had various services that they had never offered virtually. And so they asked us, hey, Sesame, I'd love to offer my services virtually. Number one, what could the service look like? Number two, what could pricing look like? And then number three, do you think customers would be excited in this? And so we were kind of the sounding board and the creative outlet for a lot of entrepreneurial physicians who started to package new services together to offer to customers. Now that concept of packaging new medical services together is such a foreign concept. It was so interesting to see, and not just on the physician side, but also that it resonated with our customers was really something that was exciting to see.
What percentage of your business is telehealth at this point?
So today, a huge portion of it is telehealth. I'd say by 75% plus. And now that's also, yeah, and that's also because our footprint is on a nationwide basis. And we're currently, we focus really on breadth rather than depth. Specifically, I'll go back to my Kansas City example. If I'm in one specific region and I use Sesame and I have an amazing experience, I want to use it over and over again. Um, we're very, very deep in Kansas City, where I can offer you a primary care service. I can offer you um, uh, radiology, cardiology, dentistry, etc. And Kansas City and many other cities. But in some cities, we don't have that depth. So I can only offer you a virtual appointment. And I think, and so for that reason, for the majority of customers, we are very wide in the number of clinicians that we serve, but we aren't deep enough in specific cities or states. I think we want to go even deeper in specific cities and states over the next 12 to 18 months to offer even more medical services, so that over time customers will ultimately be able to see a doctor for all types of medical services in all cities and states.
Amazing. Talk about your customers for a second. Are we predominantly talking about people who are uninsured, or are we talking about the insured who are disillusioned with their typical process and want access quickly and alternatives?
So it's a great question. And I think the truth is today, it's many types of consumers that we serve. On day zero, we focused heavily on the uninsured. And so this consumer on day zero, and I should say for the first half of our company life cycle, was the consumer that was uninsured, was already paying out of pocket, cash prices out of pocket, offline, as in they were going to the doctor's office, they were asking for the cash price, they were paying that offline. What we did was simply move that experience to online. And so we acquired that customer, and they, instead of transacting offline at the doctor's office, they would transact online on Sesame. I think over time, what's happened again through the pandemic, but also with our product suite of products that we offer, it's really become a mix of, we still serve that customer. It's still the uninsured patient who was already paying out of pocket cash prices, who now has a much better experience on Sesame doing that. But now we've also captured other consumers, the consumer with a high deductible healthcare plan, HDHP, who may or may not hit his or her deductible in any given year. So it's a no-brainer to use Sesame. So it's late in the year, December, and if you're not going to hit your deductible, the it's might be a no-brainer to actually transact on Sesame, because our prices might actually be lower than your copay. And so frequently, some of our virtual primary care appointments are even lower than a copay that you might pay. Not to mention that you haven't hit your deductible. We might attract the customer that is the convenience shopper, right? And so that's me. I have great insurance from my employer. Um, but sometimes it's just more convenient to use Sesame for my kids. We're traveling, one of my kids gets sick. It's an easy thing to pull up the Sesame app to see a doctor I already saw. My credit card's already saved there. And so, even if I'm insured, even if I hit my deductible, as a convenience shopper, it's such an easier experience. Quickly, if I can wrap that experience up, it's a magical moment when, I had this exact experience. I live in New York. Traveling to California, your kid gets sick or you get sick, you don't know where to go to. You can pull up the Sesame app, see a doctor virtually, somebody that either a new doctor or a doctor that you've seen before, quickly explain your symptoms virtually. In this specific instance, my kid had an earache, and they could immediately diagnose it. Oh, it's, clearly it's swimmer's ear. Have you been swimming? Yes, we are escaping the cold New York winters, and so we've been swimming 20 hours a day for the past 7 days. She's able to send the script immediately to the closest pharmacy, which is 5 minutes away, and that's it. And so within 15 minutes, I've just seen a physician. I've received a script and medication for my kid, and most importantly, my child is feeling better. That's an incredible experience to have on Sesame. And so just quickly wrapping up the customer type, we also, that's the convenience shopper. We have the price savvy shopper, the one that wants to compare prices. And I think really interestingly, we have the shopper who is in need or is seeking medical attention off hours. And so specifically, we have a lot of customers that come, between the hours of 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Eastern, when other practices or other medical services might be closed. Sesame is 24/7. And so we have, availability 24/7 on a nationwide basis. And so we attract customers who want to come during off-hour times to see a physician. What's so fascinating about that experience is for the physician side, they can actually manage their off hours or their after hours prices differently from how they manage their, regular hours. What I'm describing in a nutshell is yield management, but making up fake numbers. If a 3 p.m. appointment might be $50, a midnight appointment might be $100, right? Because the physician needs to stay awake, because the physician needs to practice very late at night. And that concept exists in other industries, i.e., if you buy a plane ticket, a week before a trip, it might be 500. If you buy it 24 hours before, it might be 1,000. Yield management exists as a concept in other industries, and it doesn't exist in healthcare services. Why? Because the midnight reimbursement rate is the exact same as the 3 p.m. reimbursement rate. And so there's no incentive for the physician to stay awake and practice during those hours. In Sesame Land, there might be, right? And I'm making up numbers, right? Of course, it might be that the midnight time slot is a cheaper price or whatever it is. But I think most importantly, we allow the capability for our physicians to actually manage their SKUs like a business would manage, like a retailer would manage its SKUs. Some SKUs are priced differently depending on the amount of inventory left. And inventory in this case is availability based on hours of the day. And for our customers as well, we offer an incredible service where suddenly, if it's midnight, a lot of workers don't get out until late hours. You can still see a doctor. You don't have to wait until the morning. You can easily see a doctor on Sesame. That's just one of many, many things that happen when you suddenly bring regular consumer experiences to healthcare.
Again, amazing. Now, I've never experienced telehealth. Are doctors at liberty to fill prescriptions 50 states, or are there particular state lines they have to work with in those scenarios?
So our physicians need actual state licensure. So they need to have licensure that allows them to practice in each state. What's interesting is we can actually show doctors. So in general, as I think this is a theme that's come up, Sesame is the sounding board to a lot of our physicians as they think about how do they actually build, a store, if you will, for physicians on their online store of services. And so specifically in this instance, we can tell physicians, and we do frequently, hey, you have a lot of demand for this service from, I'm just making it up, Phoenix, Arizona, but you don't have licensure in Arizona. And so you might want to get licensure in Arizona so you can actually practice in the state. Again, I'm making that example up, but we have all the data on our end that we can actually inform the physicians to help them build their practice. Or, hey, your prices are a little above what we see as the clearing price for this service. If you lower it by, making it up, $10, we think there's another, making all numbers up, 100 or 300 patients you can see on a daily basis. Is this something you would like to do? Right? It might not be. Your calendar might be too filled, but is this something you're willing to do? We're happy to test. And so I think in general, as I said, what we do is we offer all these tools to physicians. An analogy I use frequently with new hires or with investors is we've built Shopify for physicians, right? Where Shopify offers all kinds of tools for retailers to see, who and merchants to see, who are their buyers, what's selling the most, what's selling the least, how can you change prices? We've done that in healthcare. We've given physicians all the tools they need to build a practice, to manage their inventory, which are their medical services, to show how price affects demand. And physicians today, which I think I've shared, we have thousands on a nationwide basis, use Sesame to manage their business, just like, again, continuing this analogy, a retailer uses Shopify to manage his or her business.
Sure. Do you have any competition in this space? Has anybody jumped into the arena?
In general, there's a lot of, on a vertical basis, there's a lot of companies that offer a cash-based solution on a vertical basis. And by that, I mean, there are platforms that offer solutions for hair loss for cash prices, for erectile dysfunction for cash prices, dermatology services for cash prices. There are very few platforms that offer cash prices on a horizontal basis for all medical services. I think the 800-pound gorilla in the room is, I think Amazon has frequently said publicly that they want to launch something in the space. They have an offering today that's similar. I think large consumer-facing companies have shown interest and willingness to build something in the space. And as I said, there's a lot of, on a vertical basis, a lot of companies that offer great cash-based solutions on a vertical level. Today, I don't see any horizontal solution like Sesame that exists.
That's a good problem. Um,
Until there is one, in which case we're we're focusing on our own business. And actually, importantly, what I've realized is it's not great to focus on competition, and instead it's really important to just focus on your own business. I just told you there's no businesses today that do this. 3 years ago there were, 4 years ago there were, 5 years ago there were. Had we focused all our time on figuring out what are they doing, how are they doing it better, let's try to be more like them, I think we wouldn't be where we are today. Obviously, you take notice of it, you see that other companies are popping up. But what I've realized is that it's really just important to focus on your own business rather than looking at competition. Focus on who are your customers. For us, it's the patient and the provider, both of whom we serve. Just focus on those two. Make sure, obviously, that your business and your unit economics work. Serve them with an incredible product, and you will ultimately win. And I think one more thing importantly is that I don't, medical services or just healthcare in general is such a large pie. It's a $5 trillion pie, that this is not a winner take all space. And so there can be a lot of verticalized solutions that are incredible. There can be a couple of sesames that exist that are also incredible. This is not a winner take all space. There's so much spend in healthcare that many companies can exist that are very, very large that serve the same need and purpose.
I assume the dominoes have tipped to make your growth as much referral based as anything else, meaning a physician signs on, sees their income spike, their flexibility, their access to patients, and tells a doctor, their doctor seeks you out. Same thing on the patient side. Is that the scenario that's helped your growth the most? Has content? Are you guys marketing? I mean, where's the balance in that sort of growth?
So I think yes is the answer. It's a couple of other levers. Number one, referrals are always powerful. And so I think I've shared this theme a couple of times. We really, really focused on creating the best possible product for both our customers, our patients, and our physicians. And that has allowed, to create a 10x experience, a 10x better experience, a 100x better experience than what exists. That really drives the referral, right? Both on the customer side and on the physician side. I have an amazing experience, or my friends do, and they tell their friends, and that's a free customer that we can acquire. Same on the physician side. They see a ton of demand, they have a ton of bookings, they tell their friends who suddenly want to join Sesame, and so that viral loop has been huge tailwind for us. I think just two other, without sharing too much of our secret sauce, just two other things that have driven demand are we don't focus on every channel out there to acquire our customers. We focus on one or two. I think on the early days, we focused on every channel, where we focused on social, on search, on podcast, on display, on offline, because we didn't know what was going to work. I think over time, once we found a channel that worked really, really well, rather than trying to replicate the success of that channel and other channels, what we've done is just really double down or triple down on those channels. And so today on the paid side, we really focused heavily on, the one or two channels that we know that we're the best at. We know that we can capture high intent customers and win there. And that's on the customer side. And so I would just recommend or share to others starting a business as well is on day zero, you don't know what channel is going to work. So you have to try everything. And then over time, it's just better. It's effective to really focus, especially on the paid side, on one or two channels that work the most. On the organic side, we created a really interesting moat, which is, as I shared, a lot of what we offer to physicians is the ability to create their own, e-commerce shop. And so for Dr. Jane Doe may probably may not have or probably doesn't have an online website today. And so Sesame actually, once we offer all the tools to Dr. Jane Doe, the sesamecare.com/ Dr. Jane Doe suddenly becomes Jane Doe's de facto e-commerce online shop. And so, with that comes, ton of SEO juice. So we're the only place where, if you search for Dr. Jane Doe, Sesame will be first. If you search for Dr. Jane Doe primary care appointments, that specific services page will come first. If you search for, Dr. Jane Doe prices, suddenly all the prices that Dr. Jane Doe lists comes, and so on and so forth. Multiply that across thousands of physicians nationwide, across, call it 4 or 5 services that each offer, in English and Spanish. That's, tens of thousands of landing pages that otherwise didn't exist, where no other company can actually compete. And so that's one of many, not revealing a lot of our secret sauce, but we focused very heavily on the early days on, as I said, um, uh, figuring out which paid channel we're going to work the best, and at all times making sure that we had an organic strategy and that we were going to continue to invest in organic as we grew.
Love it. Again, you're serving both sides of the equation, so that loop just continues to grow. That's fabulous for physician and patient alike.
Totally.
All right. Look down the road a year ahead from now. What are some things you'd like to be celebrating personally and professionally?
I would like one night's good sleep, good rest. That would be a celebratory moment. Um, I think 1 year it's not enough. So I think, well, to answer your question, on a personal level, my life is it just revolves so heavily around my business in a very good way. I have very little work-life balance by design. It's because I absolutely love the company. I love what I do. And I find real purpose in building Sesame. Just coming back to why I started the company, I started it because I saw a need when my, at the time, unborn child, now 6-year-old daughter, I wanted to make sure that I could solve that problem for her. And so it brings me real joy and purpose to serve, our customers today who might have a similar need, who may not, but nonetheless, who find Sesame, who use it, who have a 10x better experience. And so, if we're just looking at the next 12 months, I just want to continue doing what I'm doing. I read our customer feedback channels every day to figure out what are we doing well, what are we doing poorly. Some of the stories move me. Some frustrate me because it's such an easy fix that we could have solved. But I want to continue doing that. I want to continue serving our customers because that brings me such deep joy. I think over the longer term, hopefully within a 3 to 5 year time horizon, as I said, I want Sesame to be, the way that consumers shop for healthcare. I want Sesame to be, the platform that you come to when you have any type of need. I think, and that's what I want. And I also think that isn't that outlandish. If I tell you, hey, in 3 to 5 years, when you're sick, you're going to go to this website where you're just going to buy healthcare like you buy everything else online, I think you would agree. I think you would say, yeah, that totally makes sense. And so I want that to be Sesame. As I said, there could be many Sesames, but I want Sesame to be one of the 3 places that you go to when you've decided that you need to seek help. Interestingly enough, that doesn't exist today in healthcare. And specifically, today, it exists in other industries. When you decided that you want a vacation, you don't start on Google, right? You don't say, how do I book a vacation? You start on your platform of choice, whether that's Airbnb or Expedia, and then you start to look for flights, you start to look for hotels, but you start there. When you want to buy a pair of headphones, you don't go to Google and you say, where do I buy headphones? You go to Amazon or Walmart or Costco, and you type in, headphones. From there, you can search, shop for Bose or Apple, or Samsung, but you start your journey on a specific platform. In healthcare today, when you're sick and you want to see a doctor, I think you do start on Google. You type in, doctor online, what to do if, skin rash, it's sore throat symptoms, whatever it might be, you're starting on Google. There's no reason why you shouldn't start on Sesame. And so over a 3 to 5 year time period, that is my goal, is for you to start your healthcare journey on Sesame. When you have decided that you are sick and you need help, you start on Sesame, and we can treat that through a physician, whether that's an in-person appointment, whether that's a virtual appointment. We can treat that through AI, which we're using now. There's a variety of ways we can treat that, but net, you're not going to Google. You're starting your healthcare journey on Sesame. That would be the goal for me.
Hey, it's a lofty and apparently, I'm going to say, attainable goal, because most people are so frustrated with where they are and what they have to go through and how long it takes to see a specialist and the question marks of what the bill's actually going to look like at the end of the day. So, no, again,
So,
I applaud your approach. All right, please tell us, what's your URL? Where can people find Sesame, and what social media outlets do you use as well?
yep, folks can visit www.sesamecare.com. Funny story for the next podcast. I'll share how I lost out on the sesame.com domain, which is a really fun AI project. But go to sesamecare.com, and you can find us on, I think, on across all social media platforms. We're also Sesame Care. I myself am at John Fontein on all social media platforms. If folks are interested, ping me there, ping me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat with folks interested in learning more.
Excellent. John Fontein, thank you for spending some time with us today on Business Ninjas. All the best to you and yours. Continued success at Sesame. I see what's possible for physician and patient alike if you succeed, and everybody thrives in that scenario. So all the best to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew, for having me.
My pleasure.